Hey everyone, and welcome back to our study regarding spiritual growth, a study designed to help us learn how to make the controlling factor of our lives living for the glory of God. In last week's lesson, we asked the questions: am I willing to follow Jesus at any cost? And am I content to do what the Lord calls me to do regardless of the consequences? Now, as we ask those questions, we ask questions of ourselves to determine if and to what extent we are currently following Jesus, living for His glory, and as a result, growing spiritually. These lessons are short, so if you've missed previous lessons, I encourage you to go back and to review those. Tonight, we'll begin with another characteristic of a life that lives for the glory of God. That characteristic being suffering with Christ. Suffering with Christ. Now, there's a lot of confusion today about what it means to suffer with Christ, so hopefully I'll be able to clear some of that up. What it means to suffer with Christ is to prefer Him and His ways so much more than the ways of this world that you are willing to suffer for His name's sake rather than go along with the world. When He is dishonored, do you feel dishonored? That's the question. When you see sin, does it disgust you like it does Jesus, or do you just simply go along with it like the rest of the world does? Psalm 69 is a messianic psalm. Jesus even quotes this verse that I'm about to read. But the psalm also applies to the feelings of David. Psalm 69 and verse 9 says this. David wrote these words: "For zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me." Now, to have zeal for the Lord is a two-sided coin. One side is a desire to live a lifestyle of worship to the Lord. That's what zeal for His house means. He even says that this zeal for your house, this worship of you, that it has consumed me, meaning it has consumed my life. So one side of the coin is to love God and to love what the Lord loves, to love His ways. The other side of the coin, in regards to being zealous for the Lord, is to hate what the Lord hates, which can be summed up in a word: sin. And the second part of the verse explains the result of what occurs when you love what God loves and you hate what God hates. It says this: "The reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me." In other words, when you live this way, those who do not love the Lord, they're not going to like you either. So here's the test. If it hurts you personally when you see God dishonored in this world, if it hurts you personally when you see God dishonored in this world, you will know that your life is aimed at living for His glory. Now let's see the living illustration of this verse in John chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. John 2, 13 through 17. "The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And He found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. And He made a scourge of cords, and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen. And He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who were selling the doves, He said, 'Take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business.' His disciples remembered that it was written, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.'" They remembered Psalm 69. We recently studied the second time that Jesus did this very thing at the end of His ministry. See, Jesus cleared out the temple at the beginning of His ministry, and then He did it again in the last week of His ministry on this earth. The temple, which was meant to be a place where God was honored the most, where He was sought after the most, it had become a market where people were being ripped off. They were sold animals. for sacrifices at exorbitant prices, and their money was changed into the money that had to be given in a specific currency. The money was changed at exorbitant prices as well. It was no longer a place of prayer. It was no longer a place where God was honored or a place where God was sought. But as Jesus referred to it in Matthew 21, it had become a robber's den. And see Jesus here, cleaning house. His actions led by a desire for God to be honored as God should have been honored. His actions being led by his disgust at the sin that was before his eyes. Having no concern for what anyone other than God would think of his actions, this is being zealous for God. You see both sides there. Jesus wanting him to be honored, and Jesus wanting God to be honored, and Jesus being disgusted that God was not being honored. Now, here's my question for you and me. When I see sin, does it grieve my heart, or do I easily tolerate it? If I won't tolerate sin, which means sometimes I have to speak up, which means sometimes I have to leave the place where I'm at, which means sometimes I have to turn off what I'm watching or listening to. It means that there are some places that I simply cannot go, and there are some things that I simply cannot take part in. And here's the challenging part. Here's what you're going to want. Here's what you're going to want to have something pre-rehearsed in your mind for. When you are asked, why won't you take part in fill in the blank? You give an answer in that moment that honors God. You give an answer that honors God regardless of the personal consequences. This is a part of what being willing to suffer for his name's sake means. But be encouraged by the words of Jesus. Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 through 12. Jesus said, "Blessed," that means supremely happy. "Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness." Not persecuted for any cause, but for the sake of righteousness. Why? Why are they supremely happy? Because for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It means heaven belongs to you. You know what Jesus is saying here? He's saying, let this be your comfort when you are persecuted. You are going to heaven. You may be what this world considers a loser. But don't worry about that. The world thought that Jesus was a loser too. Verse 11 and 12, of Matthew 5, "Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." When you are persecuted, know this, you are in elite company. Don't be discouraged. You will be insulted, mainly behind your back, but you will be insulted. There will be false things said about you, such as, man, that Wes, he really thinks that he's better than everyone else. I don't think that I'm better than anyone. But when I take a stand against sin, then it's things like that that get said about me. And it's things like that that'll be said about you. But if I am zealous for God, and if I am zealous for his ways, and if I am zealous against sin, that will happen. But when it does, I will know in my heart, as I would encourage you to know in your heart, that I'm willing to suffer for God's glory. I will know that I'm willing to suffer for God's glory. Do you know today if you are willing or not to suffer for God's glory? Because it is the gazing upon his glory that causes us to have spiritual growth. It is part of the process. If you are zealous for the Lord, you will gaze upon his glory. There's no other way around it. And you will grow. Until next time, church, love God and love others. I'm Wes LaFleur, signing off.